Welcome back, gang, and we're going to continue on with our talk about plants. And so we're going to talk about the second type or big category of plants, and that's going to be our vascular plants. And these are plants that have xylem and they have phloem. But there are two types of vascular plants. There's seedless vascular plants, and then there's seeded vascular plants. One doesn't produce seeds, the other one does produce seeds. But then there's two types of seeded plants. There's the gymnosperms, things that produces cones, and there's angiosperms, things that actually produce flowers. And so there's a lot of different types of plants out there and a lot of different classifications to go through. But we're just going to kind of hit some of the big major ones today. So again, we had the non-vascular earlier, and now we have the vascular plants. They're seeded and they're seedless. For the seeded, for the ones with seeds, there are gymnosperms and angiosperms. Either going to produce the seeds in cones or they're going to produce the seeds through flowers. And so lots of different types to talk through here. So with the seedless, we have the ferns, the club mosses, and the horsetails. So let's take a look at those. All right, so the ferns, these are the Pterophytes. These are the seedless vascular plants, a type of seedless vascular plant. And there it is. There's a fern. And if you remember from earlier, this is which generation? If you flip it over, what's underneath the leaf? The sories. And what's inside the sories? Spores. Good. So this is the sporophyte generation. So remember, this is also going to be the dominant feature for our vascular plants. And I mean, you find ferns all over the place. There's all different types of ferns growing in a myriad of places. If you live here in the South, I mean, what's the number one thing old Southern women put on their front porches? Ferns. That's just a classic thing that we have. So we see ferns a lot, and they do grow native here out in the woods, all different types of species. If you're lucky enough, you'll even see some of these growing up in the early parts of late February, early March and April. These are called fiddleheads because they look like they look like the head of a fiddle. I would say violin, but this is America, and in America we say fiddles apparently. So this is it's Pterophytes, and these are a type of seedless vascular plant. Another type is called the Lycophytes. These are going to include the club mosses. Now this does kind of look like some stuff we saw earlier. It looks like the club moss, the actual mosses that we saw earlier. But this isn't a moss at all. Keep in mind that the dominant form is going to be the sporophyte. So all this green, darker green stuff at the bottom here, and the darker green stuff here, this is going to be the sporophyte. So then what's this part up top? Well, this is the gametophyte. And what does that make these? These are the cones. Or they call them, another term for club mosses actually, they'll call them coned mosses, because these are actually cones. Not like we see in pine trees, but similar. But this is called Lycopodium is the species for this. And there's a couple different species that live here in Mississippi. You find them in low-lying areas. They do have tubes inside of them, xylem and phloem, but they still don't grow real tall. They just kind of weed their way through the undergrowth and leaves and stuff like that, and do really good at capturing, absorbing sunlight in shady areas. And so they're really neat. You see them all over the place. Lycophytes, club moss, check them out. And then we have another type of lycophyte, which is the horsetail, another type of seedless vascular plant. So there's a couple different names for these. Call these horsetails because when they start to frond out, they put out these little leaves for catching sunlight, helps them absorb a little more sunlight. They're not flat leaves, though. These are just like little, almost like needles that stick out. But these all this grows down by the riverside. It's a type of riverside vegetation that we call riparian. And whenever the settlers were moving out west, they'd stop by the rivers every single night because that's where you're drinking water. It's where you watered your horses, where you got your water to cook and to take showers in. And so that's why everybody on the Oregon Trail died of dysentery, because they were drinking the same water they were pooping in. But as the wind would blow, these horsetails would move back and forth in the wind, and it looked like a horse whipping its tail because of all these little hair-like structures that are growing out, these little needles that are growing out. Okay, but this is the dominant form. This is the sporophyte. So what is this little cone at the top then? This is the gametophyte. This is going to produce gametes. And so there's another name for this stuff other than horsetail. It's actually called scouring rush. Now, a rush is usually a type of grassy like growth that grows pretty thick and grows closer to water. So this is one of the rushes, but scouring rush. So let's say you're going on a vacation or you're moving out west in the early part of the century.